Welcome everyone to the second episode of our Carbony podcast, Climate Talks. Today with my guest, Katharina Werner. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thanks for the invitation.
You are the deputy of the Austrian Parliament for the Austrian party NEOS. And to start off for our audience, I would quickly ask you to give a short introduction of yourself and what is it that you do?
Okay. As you said, my name is Katharina Werner. I'm 37 years old. I'm now a member of parliament since November last year, so almost half a year. My areas are, on the one hand, consumer protection law. That's the one area. And the second area is about animal protection. Mm-hmm. Those are my specific themes.
And as we came across already in the pre-talks, you told me that those topics are also very much affected by climate change. I think we will also have time in the talk to emphasize this. But before we get there, I would kindly ask you this really open question, since you are from the politician side, and we at Carbony do believe that also politics can play a major role when it comes to climate change and how we can positively have an impact. And what is the role of the politics? Where do you see it in regard of how can we change the climate change? How can we stop it?
Okay, I think politics plays a really big part in solving the climate issue, because it sets the legal framework for all the climate issues. But you have to differentiate a little bit, because we have various layers of politics. And as you know, the most important rules that are set are from the European Union. Mm-hmm. And the national framework somehow makes it on a lower level, implements those rules. And so you have different areas and different reaches how you can impact the climate change.
Would you say on an EU level, of course, you know, the people always hear about the EU Green Deal and the 2050 goals, the 2040 goals. So those would be the bigger framework, right? And then
exactly.
The Austrian government, the Austrian parliament, the Austrian opposition implements those rules, kind of. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this for the audience to understand how this is really working.
Yeah, I think one moment that is very important and is still in the minds of the people, there was that issue with atomic energy. Yeah, last November, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whether that should be part of the
decarbonization, yes,
decarbonization strategy or not. And on the EU level, the EU said yes, it should be. But on the Austrian level, we have a very strong
atomic energy, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, attitude. It's an attitude. It's not legally somewhere, but it's an attitude that we have. And so on the Austrian level, we try to implement it without that kind of energy. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the EU gives a very wide and very long-term goals, and you have to implement it on a much lower level with much more direct impact. So we decide on which kind of energy type we want to invest, for example.
And if I understood you correctly, where would you see us in Austria on this journey of implementing, let's say, the EU rules and creating a strong legal framework, which will then be at some point I guess, binding for companies that are situated in Austria, but also for the citizen at some point. Mm-hmm. Where do you see it as the moment? Are we at the crossroad? Do you think we are on a good way?
Right now, actually, we are quite behind, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
We are not really on track. There were different reasons for that. On the one hand, Corona, that was in some ways a way forward because the emissions deteriorated, but only because there was less mobility, for example. But in the long run, it somehow brought us somewhere back. Okay,
it was a nice
cover
not on
up,
the road.
Right? Yes, it was a nice cover up. But for example, when it comes to how many streets we're building, how easy it is for companies, for example, to build a new company building or something like that, on the amount that is built, we are very, very much not on track.
Yeah.
That's one example, but also concerning agriculture. There are other countries, for example, where there is agrophotovoltaic, I think it is called. For example, the Netherlands and Denmark, they're very much in that corner and they promote that. And in Austria, there's no real discussion about it. Okay?
When you say, sorry that I interrupt you, when you say real discussion, do you think this needs to be discussed within society, or is this a discussion where you see also the government or the politics have a certain responsibility to start off those discussions? What is your standing?
The reason why there is no discussion on a political level is because of the two parties that right now are forming the government. The ÖVP, the People's Party, they would think about it and would say, okay, maybe we could do something. But on the side of the Greens, they say, no, definitely not. Before we are doing something like agri-photovoltaics, we should do photovoltaic on every roof, for example. Yeah. But I think agri-photovoltaic would have some other positive impacts. For example, chickens, when they are free-running chickens, they have a large area, but usually they stay near the entrance of the
stall
the protection hub. Yeah. Because there are animals which flee from the birds above. Okay.
It's their instinct.
It's their instinct. And if you would plant those free-running areas with photovoltaic, that is a little bit on some under construction or something like that, they would use it more. So they would really use the space they have. And so you could combine animal protection and decarbonization, for example. Which
would be a kind of win-win situation, right?
Because it would be a win-win situation. Yes. But there's so much ideology behind it, so they won't talk about it, and so it's not a topic in Austria.
But because you already brought up the Netherlands, do you see any other good examples where we could learn from and where we could take a good example from and say, wow, this is, it doesn't matter if it's in regard of the mindset, or in regard of different politics or different emphasis on this topic, because I do believe that the topic of climate change and emissions and all those issues that are resulting from it in the next decades are a very dominating topic that we need to address on a global scale.
Definitely. I think the mindset in the Netherlands is a little bit different. because they have a lot more fear, because they know when the sea level is rising, actually they would disappear as a country. Yeah? And in Austria, we still have, even when we hear, oh, all the glaciers will disappear, it's some kind of lack of attitude. It's oh, tomorrow in 50 years. So what does it have to do with myself? Yeah. So
and also
somehow kind of.
Yeah, and also what I sometimes see when we talk to partners is that a lot of times people don't want to be the first in Austria. If it's something new that you're talking about with them, they're like, but why should I be the first now to start with? So far, no one is doing it, or no one is obliged to do it. So let's better keep distance from certain new technologies, new ideas. This is,
so we are not the early adopters. We are.
But of course, when I'm in talks and in kind of like when I talk with people about this whole EU Green Deal, obviously always those numbers like 2040, 2050 are there. And a lot of people always raise this question, okay, those are big goals. They might seem far away, but still at some point we need to start somewhere. Now, if I may bring up this little experiment, if you were the Prime Minister of Austria tomorrow, so basically, let's say, partly in charge of things and have a lot of power to put things into a certain direction, how would you bring those topics forward, especially with the companies who are, in my opinion, the main contributors to emissions, and where I think the whole change of mindset and then change of actions need to be actually starting from?
I think right now we're in a very special situation, because right now, due to the Ukraine crisis, there is a window of opportunity in my eyes. Suddenly, there was an awareness that we are so much dependent on Russian gas or Russian oil. And those dependencies are human-made. They are not automatically there because they are political decisions. But as we already said, the Austrians are not the early adopters. So when it comes to solutions, the first solution is, we support the travelers, those who are coming from the countryside to work, with 420 million euros. It's 500 million of euros that goes into that. So one of the actions I would do as a Prime Minister, if I had the support of the other ministers, definitely, to reduce that Pendlerpauschale. And instead give the people contributions in kind, that is better public transport, for example, and not monetary benefits. Because if the public transport is better, then more people are going to use it.
Yeah.
And it's not only about people, but also about goods. If the public transport is better, especially the
train or the buses?
The trains especially, the railroads, the infrastructure of the railroads, then we would have a lot of decarbonization in that area. Yeah. And transport is another example where communities can do a lot. And I think we have to strengthen also the communities, the municipal level. The cities, for example, in the Netherlands, we have loads and loads of people who are totally going by bike wherever they can. And in Austria, it's getting more, but still there are lots of opportunities but that's also only possible if you have the infrastructure.
I was
bikes.
A bit disappointed because the other day I saw a post from some EU Parliament member, and he posted like there's a new initiative where 100 cities in Europe or in EU are committing to become carbon neutral or net zero by 2030. It was. And there was various from various countries, various cities, and I was a bit disappointed because in Austria it was only one city. It was Klagenfurt, which is cool. They're doing it, but I think there's so much potential. For example, also for my hometown Steyr. So I think also you're completely right. It needs to also start on a smaller level in the communities, in the municipalities, not only on state level, and everybody can contribute something. But I also do believe that some initiative needs to come from the companies, because companies are main part of emissions and main polluters. And to be honest, right now I see that the legal framework might be already there, but there's no legal binding to it. There's no obligatory to follow it all the way through. What is your opinion on this, and where do you see it transforming in the next years? Where do you think it will go?
I think companies are very much going forward in this topic. For example, it's one of the biggest users of energy in Austria.
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing a lot of research how they can decarbonize their company.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know, it's easier to decarbonize a lot of companies that are doing some services or something like that. But a production in that specific field that really needs that lot of energy, it's really hard to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that would be really necessary is the public hand. For example, we know that they, for example, would need windmills, but that would be not enough. You also would need some space or some method to save that energy.
Mm-hmm. Storage. Mm-hmm.
Storage. And that's the next big question in my mind.
How to store clean energy.
Definitely, because you have huge possibilities to produce it.
Mm-hmm.
Wind, water, and sun. But if there is no wind and if there is no sun, how do you store it?
Yeah.
And there are also very innovative companies, but that's the next big question, I think.
Mm-hmm. When I say, okay, big companies like the first, for sure, they're innovation leaders and thought leaders in this process. But would you personally, would you be in favor of also have obligatory rules that include maybe also incentives or even like fees if companies don't start those processes? Because on EU level, we can already see for 2023, there are this new CSRD initiatives that will include a lot of companies that might not have even started the journey yet. But when I talk to them, they don't know about it, or they have heard of it, but they don't know the full scale of what this will be actually impacting. So what is your personal opinion on this?
Concerning that, I can say something because I looked at the numbers. In Austria, right now, 90 companies are doing that because they have more than 500 employees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In 2023, 2,000 companies will have to do it. But
Just a
compared
massive
to the
increase.
amounts of companies we have in Austria, it's about 700,000 companies we have in Austria.
Yeah.
It's only really, really a tiny aspect. Concerning doing something compulsory, new legal requirements or something like that, I think right now we are in the situation, and that's what I call the window of opportunity, that the companies themselves say, oh, I have to save something, I have to become independent. And as soon as I can, I want to produce as much energy myself as I can. Because all the prices are rising very quickly, and the next big issue will come in the autumn, because right now we are not heating anything, and then we have less of gasoline available, and so the prices will still rise enormously. And so as long as the companies themselves want to save on the one hand and to produce renewable energy themselves, as long as there is a drive from the companies themselves, I don't see any necessity to give more regulations or also incentives, because they are doing it themselves. So why should the state give additional incentives? But some things companies can't do, for example, windmills or something like that. Not every company can build their windmill.
Yeah.
That's the public hand that has to do it. And there we have to invest. Okay.
This brings me, because in our pre-talks, you brought up this topic of greenwashing, and I know it's very dear to your heart to prevent those kind of things. So let's assume we have this window of opportunity, and there's a very intrinsic drive with a lot of companies in Austria right now to really go into this direction of becoming net zero, climate neutral, having some actions, using new technologies, maybe even neutralize some parts of it. But how can companies prevent, or how can the public or the politics prevent that greenwashing is occurring?
Well, there we do have to make more stricter regulations. One example I'd like to give when it comes to greenwashing in finance. Because that's also part of that window of opportunity. Loads of people want to invest into green energy. That's really great, because then the state does not have to do that much when the people themselves are doing it. But, and that's a really big but, in Austria, only about 200 of I think in English it's also called fonds. Have the so-called Umweltzeichen.
Like a climate or sustainability certification.
Yeah, exactly. That's the Austrian climate sustainability certificate. And many more others are sold as carbon neutral or something like that, because there are no real restrictions how you're allowed to do advertising with that, or what sustainability really means, for example, in financing.
Yeah, it's a very broad term.
Yeah, and there we would have to make more strict laws and definitions what's really sustainability in when you want to invest, for example. And
if I understand you correctly, this needs to come from the legal framework, right? Because if it's unregulated and everybody can claim at some point, hey, I'm climate neutral, or I'm CO2 negative or positive, then it's like, okay, and if there's never a real controlling of that, and this is also where I think this whole CSRD is going at the end, because I do believe at some point we need to get to this level that an ESG report is on the level as it is now for financial reporting, that you understand, okay, a company, they need to report their finances to understand, is this a healthy company? And so they should also report everything that is related to environment, social, and governance, because it's just their responsibility as a main player in this whole game.
Definitely, and that's what I saw when I did some research. As far as I see, there is no reporting requirement somewhere to a public ministry or something like that.
Yeah.
There's only, you have to do it, and not even you have to publicize it on your website or something like that. And
some have it, yeah.
No punishment. If you don't do it, then what? And if there any regulation is only as strong as the consequences that stand behind it. If there are no consequences, why should they do it? It's work, and it's yeah.
Yeah, and as you said before, right now, if 90 companies in Austria, and then let's say next year some hundreds, it's still a very low percentage of overall Austrian, industry landscape. And
definitely, but on the other hand, one has also to think about it. It's very dangerous for the Austrian economy to do gold plating in those kind of things, because we already have a very, very difficult position right now, because looking at the tax system or something like that, we have very high taxes. That makes it not so, how do you say it?
There's not so much room for,
yes,
or not a lot of flexibility, because the tax costs are already very high.
Exactly.
And you could easily, overdo it.
Exactly. And on the other hand, especially for in doing business in Austria, we have right now a very high lack of professionals in the IT, but also in tourism or something like that. So right now it's a very difficult situation for many companies in Austria. And
you mean the lack of, let's say, those high qualified employees or people with specific knowledge, right? You think it would even suffer further if you put companies on under a lot of pressure to even now, report, do a lot of investments in this direction, because
if you do it alone in the EU, and that's the thing, because when a company decides, where do I produce, or where do I have my company seat, they look on all the countries in Europe. And if you have one country that alone is doing the gold plating and saying, but when you come, you have to do that and that and that and that and that. But at the same time, you have no professionals or high educated employees to do the work. And on the other hand, you have to pay a lot of taxes. Then the companies will say, oh, so maybe I do my thing somewhere else. Okay. And the bureaucratic mechanism all around. So we have to reduce those things. For example, we have to have more professionals and educate them. We have to lower the taxes complete as all over, not only for the companies, but also for all the employees. So saving in the system, yeah. And then we can put something on and say, okay, you want to have your company here, then you have to deliver that too, for example.
I 100% agree that we need to keep the attractiveness of coming to Austria as a company, as a new founder, whatsoever, and say, okay, this is a favorable place for me where I want to start with my company. But in this regard, I could also, I don't want to, say that this is not true, but I could also argue that if I see as a young person, there's Austria, and this country is taking a lot of cool actions, and the companies there are very progressive, and they really emphasis on this topic because they know this is something that has important on the scale of humanity or globally. I would say it's also attractive, right, for some people. Of course, I know people are driven also by the main incentive is money, but on the other hand, it's also wow. They have a bigger perspective and they fight the good fight. And I do believe that the generations to come will also have a clear look on this and see who to whom I want to commit.
But that would be right now our window of opportunity. For example, giving those 420 million that are now given to carbonization, definitely, into decarbonization mechanisms.
Yes.
And also, I'm not really a fan of the Klimabonus. Yeah, because from the, I think, 2.4 billion euros that will be distributed, 1.4 are going into that Klimabonus, and it's again some monetary benefit instead of investing it into
investments. Yeah.
For example, the infrastructure.
Yeah. To get a little bit back and to set the basics for our listeners to understand, can you also say what is the national target for overall Austria? You know, what is the commitment there? What is the plan? And where do you see us in ways? What kind of milestones do we need to achieve to finally reach this goal?
Okay, the national target date for climate neutrality is 2040. That's it. We are doing massive investments. For example, this year, 2.4 billion euros into decarbonization. The key milestones for companies is 2023. You already mentioned that, where a lot of them have to do the reporting. The milestones for Austria in itself.
It could be also your vision, you know. It doesn't need to be, you know, that this is the official milestones, but where do you see what could be good milestones to reach where you say, okay.
For example, in my spheres, animal protection and consumer protection. One thing that would be really great, that would be a green footprint, you know, carbonary footprint on every product you're buying in Austria, on every food article and every consumer article, so that you can see as a consumer, when I'm buying that product, this is what it costed the environment to produce it. And to bring there some transparency into it. And I think that's also very important when you're looking at food, for example, because the chicken you are buying that comes from Turkey has to be much more expensive than the chicken you're buying that was bred in Austria. That Absolutely. Needs to be so.
Yep.
And only because of the emissions.
And right now it's the contrary.
Right now, unfortunately, sometimes it's the contrary.
No, you're
and you have to see where the food comes from, how the animals were bred, whether they had some light and fresh air and, well, yeah, sunshine, or if they were bred in huge factories, actually.
I do believe, and we already talked about this before, that it would be very necessary to connect those two things, the well-being of animals with the carbon footprint. And
Definitely.
ideally, I think there are not a lot of people who would disagree, is that we have the best animal standards, and they also include a low carbon footprint. And actually, science also shows it that, organic farming is also contributing to decarbonization. The less industrialized farming with animals is also much better for the planet. And I know so many people, friends and acquaintances that say, I don't need meat anymore because I also want to contribute. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I'm just saying there's a certain awareness from the people's side. And as you brilliantly came up with this idea, is if we have some signs on the products, we can erase the awareness of the consumers. And this is very much needed, in my opinion.
Definitely. And on the other hand, I think we have to let the market work a little bit more. For example, when you are looking at the market for pigs, pork, every fifth pork is produced too much in the European Union. So actually we throw it away. And I think that's crazy. And why is that as it is? Because of promotions we're giving. We are promoting that kind of production. And that's wrong. We have to go right in the other way. We have to promote a good production, organic production.
Who is the promoter?
Two ways. In Austria, we are getting loads and loads of promotions from the European Union, and then we are distributing it. And only a small part of that promotions are combined with how the animals are treated. Okay. And so actually you should go the other way around. Promotions only if you are having not the minimal standard. There should be no promotions anymore for minimal standards, because that's minimum. Why should I promote that?
Yeah,
you have to do it, otherwise you are not allowed to produce.
It's illegal.
That should be the idea, actually, and not, oh, you're doing the minimum, you get some promotion.
Yeah, it's crooked. Yeah. I think, this is even for myself an insight, and we are first of all also consumers, we need products
Definitely.
to survive. And when you go to the grocery store, everything looks just innocent, right? It looks nice, it's well packaged, but there's a big journey that included the well-being or not the well-being of an animal, and also a hell lot of emissions, not only talking about transportation, but the feeding.
Exactly.
There's so many things included. And I think this needs to be changed systematically, because the consumers will always buy what is on the shelves, the majority will buy, even if you have some people who are very aware of this topic and make a distinctive decision for themselves to do something good, but the majority.
Definitely, but there's a saying, never waste a good crisis. And I think right now it is like that, because also due to the crisis in Ukraine, the United Nations already warned there will be a hurricane of hunger in Northern Africa, because all the production of wheat of the Ukraine usually goes, or loads of that part are going to North Africa to support the people over there, because it's cheap. And now the prices are rising. And I think we have to ask the question, should it be possible for everybody to eat meat every day? Or is it simply a fact that maybe the market will say whether you can afford it or not.
Mm.
There are other protein productions that we now are feeding to the animals that we can eat.
Mm.
Peas or soy. So
yeah, it's a huge topic that involves also, let's say, different stakeholders that have different interests also, and to push their agenda. Yeah, but you're completely right. Those topics are very much interconnected.
yeah, and I think it will clear itself, because the market will say in summer, autumn, that the prices will rise for meat.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will not be able to buy so much meat and eat so much meat. And I think we should empower the people to see it as a chance for change.
Or to create a positive narrative around these things. Yeah.
Definitely.
That have also an impact. Maybe it has an impact on my life, but maybe it has a greater impact on a different level. That is worth also maybe the fact that I need to change. I cannot eat meat every day, cheap meat every day.
Exactly. And on the other hand, we have also to empower the people to see how the products they are consuming are made.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also relevant for food.
Absolutely. Coming back to this CSRD topic, I wanted to ask you, let's say for an Austrian company, we have this EU framework. We're trying to implement the framework also on the national level in Austria. But do you have any tips where they can inform themselves, or who would be their partner to understand? I'm naive now. Who will tell them, by the way, you fall now under this regulation? Will they get an envelope where it's written, or just out of curiosity?
Actually, it is quite easy for a company to see whether they fall under that regulation or not.
Mm-hmm.
They know whether they have 250 plus employees or not. That's one point. And the other point is they know their economic data. So they know whether they have 20 million
revenues,
total assets or
mm-hmm.
not. So they actually know. The much more difficult question is to know what one has to do then. That's the much more difficult question. And usually, at least it was with the DSGVO, Digital Datenschutzgrundverordnung, exactly.
We will have it in the comments afterwards.
Data protection law. The Austrian Chamber of Commerce did actually a good job to inform the people. Unfortunately, it was too late. So right now, the Austrian Chamber of Commerce, I would recommend them to get the grips, do the work, and because usually they are also in the process of how the EU norm is put on national level. Okay, so they already have quite a lot of insights, so they can inform their members.
So you're saying also, if let's say someone of our listeners would have questions there, even if they know, okay, I have more than 250 employees, I have more than 20 million revenues, the Austrian Chamber of Commerce could be a good door to knock at and say,
definitely, it should be. And if it is not, then come to me. We make them.
Cool. Yeah, yes. No, because sometimes it's that easy, It's a very complicated topic, but sometimes people need to hear from an official side, this is fact, this is really also including you. Do this and this, and those are the next steps, or this you could think about. And then people think about this internally. Companies think about this. But they need
and as
often
far as
this.
I know, the EU regulation will be transformed into national law only in December 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be very, very short
one day
period where the companies can react.
Yeah. So you're saying the time to inform and educate companies and people on this topic would be now.
Actually, it would be now.
Okay. Yeah.
Because otherwise in 2023, they are there and say, oh, there's a new regulation.
Yeah. No, see, this is also the reason why we're doing this podcast and why I wanted to have you as a guest on it, to also educate people on this topic. I know that we cannot, tip in every little detail here, but in general, that people can understand. There is something, it might include me. I should maybe keep my eyes and ears open. And
the second address is always the ministry. And in this specific topic, it's the Ministry for Climate Change, Klimaministerium, they call it. They have a special section, and in this section, they have the experts who are also framing that kind of law, putting it onto the national level. And they know what will come and what not, and how it will look like. Cool.
Yeah, we'll also link this. Yeah, coming to an end, I would put up a final question, like, what is your vision for a sustainable future? What would you do to hand over, a good planet to the next generation? And this doesn't need to be based only on what you're currently doing, but where do you see we as humanity or as people have a good angle to start something, actually?
I think everybody has a lot of power, actually. As a consumer, you already said you're making the decisions. When you're going to the supermarket and buying organic food instead of normal food, something like that, you made a decision that's also giving the market an input. And if the trend is going there, the production will go there. It's quite easy. And on the other hand, you also have a decision concerning your transportation, whether you choose to have a car or not. And also in the rural areas, it is possible to use public transport or to get together and not use 5 cars to transport 5 single people, but to use 1 car and transport 5 people. Mm-hmm. So-called Fahrgemeinschaften, for example. And on the other hand, I think politics has to give, put an emphasis on really achieving that transformation due to a decarbonized society. Mm-hmm.
And in this, you're also playing the role right now. You as a deputy member of the parliament.
Definitely, at least in my parts for the agriculture and for the consumers, that greenwashing shouldn't be an option, but real green financing, for example, so that the consumer can easily decide, I really want to make a change.
Cool.
Great.
Katharina Werner, thank you very much for your time, for being guest.
Thank you very much.
On the second Climate Talks, and all the best, and thank you.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.